The discovery. The cold winds of Selphar Prime howled across the barren landscape, carrying the scent of old, forgotten wars. The ground was cracked and dry, as if the planet itself held its breath. In the center of an ancient, abandoned city stood a massive stone platform. On that platform, stuck deep in the heart of black rock, was a spear. It wasn't an ordinary spear. It glowed with a faint blue light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Strange symbols swirled along the shaft, changing shape as if alive. For centuries, many had tried to pull the spear free. Alien warriors, bounty hunters, and treasure seekers, all had failed. Above the spear, carved into the stone arch, were words in an ancient language. Scholars had translated them long ago. The spear chooses one born of resilience and fire. Only a human can awaken the storm. No one understood what it meant. Humans were new to the galactic stage, often seen as weak and unworthy. The other species laughed at the idea that a human could wield something so ancient and powerful. But now, standing before the spear, was a human. Captain Elias Grant adjusted the visor of his helmet as his eyes locked on the weapon. He was tall, with short dark hair and a scar along his jaw. A reminder from a pirate ambush years ago. His crew stood behind him, watching in silence. The air around the spear was heavy, like the calm before a storm. "So this is it," Elias said, stepping closer. His voice echoed in the emptiness. "The legendary spear of the Serathi." Lieutenant Kara Voss, his second in command, checked her scanner. "Energy readings are off the charts, Captain. But it's been like this for centuries. Just a myth, if you ask me." Elias gave a short laugh. "Yeah, a glowing myth that hums like it's breathing." The spear vibrated softly as if responding to his words. He froze. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Kara nodded, eyes wide. The energy levels just spiked. Elias's heart raced. He wasn't a believer in prophecies. He'd fought his way up from Earth's undercity slums through grit and stubbornness. Luck and legends didn't fit into his world. But something about that spear called to him. He climbed the stone steps, each footstep echoing. The blue light brightened with every step. When he reached the top, the humming turned into a low, steady pulse. He hesitated, then stretched out his hand. The air around the spear crackled like static. The moment his fingers touched the cool metal, the world changed. A deep vibration shot through the ground. The stone platform cracked with a sharp, ear-splitting sound. Blue lightning arced from the spear, climbing his arm and wrapping around his chest. Elias gasped but didn't let go. The symbols along the spear's shaft glowed brighter, forming words in English. "The storm has awakened." The spear slid from the stone, as if it had waited centuries for that moment. Elias stumbled back, the weapon light as a feather in his grip. The ground shook harder. Ancient buildings crumbled. The sky above turned dark as thick, swirling clouds appeared from nowhere. "Captain, we need to move," Kara shouted. Elias sprinted down the steps, the spear crackling with blue energy. His crew ran toward the ship. Behind them, the stone platform shattered, sending shards of rock into the sky. They'd reached the ship, the Orion's edge, and sealed the hatch just as the ground split open. Elias collapsed into his seat, gripping the spear. The blue glow dimmed but didn't disappear. His chest heaved as he tried to process what had just happened. The comm system crackled. "Unidentified human vessel," came a cold voice. "This is General Krull of the Zerathi Empire. Surrender the ancient weapon, or face destruction." The crew froze. Kara turned pale. The Zerathi? How did they know? Elias's jaw tightened. The Zerathi were ruthless conquerors who craved ancient technology. If they got the spear, Earth would be next. He tightened his grip around the spear. It hummed softly, as if waiting for him to decide. "Elias," Kara whispered, "what do we do?" He looked at the screen. A Zerathi dreadnought loomed in orbit, its weapons locking onto them. Elias stood and planted the spear's tip on the metal floor. The hum grew louder, resonating through the ship. He met Kara's gaze with steel resolve. "We run," he said, "but not forever. This spear chose a human for a reason, and I'm going to find out why." The engines roared to life. The Orion's edge shot into the sky as lightning from the strange storm crackled around them. The Zirathi dreadnought fired, but the spear glowed brightly, bending the energy blasts away like a shield. As the ship vanished into the stars, the spear whispered in Elias's mind, "The storm has awakened, and the war is just beginning." The Chosen and the Curse. The stars stretched endlessly before the Orion's edge as it raced away from Selphar Prime. The blue glow of the ancient spear reflected off the control panels in the dimly lit cockpit. The hum of the engines was steady, but tension crackled in the air. Captain Elias Grant sat at the helm, the spear across his lap. The weapon no longer pulsed with wild energy. Instead, it vibrated softly, like a sleeping creature breathing in rhythm with his heart. His mind raced. He wasn't a hero or some mythical chosen one. He was just a stubborn human trying to survive in a galaxy that didn't care if Earth lived or died. Behind him, Lieutenant Karavos paced back and forth. Her boots tapped against the metal floor with restless energy. "The Zirathi don't give up, Elias. If they tracked us once, they'll do it again." He nodded without looking up. "I know." "Then what's the plan? That dreadnought out there has enough firepower to crack a moon in half, and we just ran off with something they clearly want." Elias tightened his grip on the spear's shaft. The cool metal pulsed as if aware of the conversation. He thought about the message the weapon had revealed when it came free from the stone. "The storm has awakened." And now, General Krull of the Zirathi Empire was hunting them. The comm system crackled. "Incoming transmission. Encoded Zirathi signal," the ship's AI announced. Kara's hand flew to her blaster. Elias leaned forward and tapped the control panel. "Let's hear it." The voice that followed was sharp, cold, and filled with menace. "Captain Elias Grant, you hold an artifact that does not belong to you. The Spear of Tempest is a weapon of unimaginable power. Surrender it, and Earth will be spared." Elias's blood ran cold. He activated the comm. "Yeah, I've heard Zirathi promises before. Always end the same way, with human colonies burned to ash." There was a pause, then soft, cruel laughter. "You do not understand what you hold, human. That spear is older than your species. It does not belong in the hands of a fragile, short-lived creature like you. Surrender it, or watch Earth burn." The transmission cut out. Kara swore. "He knows where we're from. Earth's in danger." Elias stood, gripping the spear. "We can't go home." "Not yet." He turned to the nav console. "Set course for the Halos Rift." Kara's eyes widened. "That region's a nightmare. Black holes, sensor ghosts, pirates." "Exactly," Elias said. "It'll buy us time." The engines roared as the ship altered course. Hours later, Elias sat alone in his quarters. The spear lay across the metal table, glowing softly. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion pressing down on him. When he closed his eyes, the moment he pulled the spear free replayed in his mind. The voice of the weapon whispered again, "The storm has awakened, and the war is just beginning." He opened his eyes and stared at the spear. "What are you?" he muttered. The glow intensified. The air around him crackled with static. A shadowy figure appeared across the room, made of flickering blue light. It was tall and humanoid, with elongated features and eyes that glowed like twin stars. Its voice was deep, resonant. "I am Serathis, keeper of the Tempest. The spear chose you, Elias Grant." Elias gripped the arm of his chair. "Why me?" The holographic figure tilted its head. "Because humanity understands resilience. The storm requires not brute strength, but unbreakable spirit." "Yeah, well, I'm not some mythical hero." "None are, until the storm tests them. The temperature dropped, and Elias felt the weight of unseen forces pressing against his chest. The figure raised a translucent hand, and images flooded Elias's mind. Massive alien dreadnoughts burning worlds to ash. The spear, glowing like a miniature star, hurling lightning across a battlefield. A shadow with many eyes watching from the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge. The images vanished. Elias gasped for breath. What was that? The truth, Serathis said. The Zirathi seek the spear to awaken an ancient weapon hidden in their vaults. If they succeed, Earth will fall. The spear is both key and lock. You must stop them. Elias clenched his fists. And if I don't? Then humanity will become nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered among the stars. The figure faded, and the room returned to normal. The spear lay silent and cold on the table. The next day, Kara found Elias in the cockpit, staring at the swirling chaos of the Halos rift through the view screen. You look like you haven't slept, she said. Didn't. He glanced at her. The spear talked to me. Or something did. Zirathi wanted to unlock a superweapon. Kara's face hardened. So what's the plan? Elias's eyes burned with grim determination. We find that weapon first and destroy it. Kara nodded. Where do we start? Elias gripped the spear. The metal vibrated and projected a star map into the air. A single point flashed red. A dead system on the far edge of known space. Right there, Elias said. The battlefield of the ancients. The engines fired, and the Orion's edge plunged into the rift. Behind them, cloaked in darkness, a Zirathi scout ship trailed them silently. The storm had awakened, and war was coming. The chase across stars. The Orion's edge sliced through the swirling chaos of the Halos rift like a spear through storm clouds. Outside the ship's reinforced windows, reality bent and twisted, the gravitational pull of black holes warping starlight into eerie spirals. The engines roared as the ship dodged invisible traps of compressed space. Captain Elias Grant gripped the control sticks with white knuckles. His jaw was clenched, eyes fixed on the shifting patterns ahead. The rift was a labyrinth designed by nature to crush the unprepared. But right now, it was their only hope. Behind them, the Zirathi scout ship clung to their trail like a predator tracking wounded prey. Come on, Elias muttered, steering the ship toward a collapsing nebula. The spear, secured beside his seat, pulsed faintly with cold blue light. He could feel its hum through the deck plating, like the distant growl of thunder. He didn't know how, but he was sure the Zirathi were tracking the weapon's energy signature. Beside him, Lieutenant Kara Voss monitored the scanners, her lips pressed into a thin line. They're still there, she said. One ship, cloaked. Zirathi stealth tech. They haven't fired yet. They're waiting for us to tire out, Elias said. He yanked the controls, sending the ship into a sharp dive through a corridor of compressed matter. The hull groaned. Or they're hoping we lead them to something. Kara's eyes widened. The ancient battlefield. The weapon. Elias nodded. The spear's map had pointed them to the derelict expanse, a graveyard of forgotten warships from a conflict that predated human history. Somewhere among the wreckage lay the secret the Zirathi wanted. The ship's comm system crackled. A distorted voice spoke through static. Surrender the spear. You cannot outrun us forever. Elias switched off the comm with a snarl. Like hell we can't. He pushed the engines to full thrust. Plasma trails burst from the thrusters as the ship sped toward the gravitational corridor. Alarms blared. The AI announced coldly, warning, structural integrity at 87%. Prolonged acceleration in this zone will result in hull damage. Noted, Elias muttered. The spear vibrated beside him. Its glow shifted from cold blue to crackling white. The air grew colder. Kara leaned toward it. Is it reacting to the rift? No, Elias said, his voice tight. To them. The ship shuddered as a blast of crimson plasma streaked past their starboard wing. The Zerathi had opened fire. "Brace!" Elias shouted. A second blast struck the rear deflector shield. Sparks exploded across the control panels. The ship lurched, throwing Kara against her seatbelt. Elias wrestled with the controls, trying to stabilize. The rift, once their cover, now turned into a death trap. Gravity surged and twisted around them. "Shields at 32%, Kara shouted. "We can't take another hit like that." Elias's mind raced. He glanced at the spear. Its glow intensified as though urging him to act. Desperate, he grabbed the weapon with one hand and slammed the base against the deck. Energy rippled from the spear in waves. The control panels flickered. The gravitational distortions outside shifted. "What did you just do?" Kara asked, voice shaking. "I have no idea," Elias said. The ship accelerated forward without his command. The rift's deadly currents parted ahead, forming a smooth path of shimmering blue. The Zerathi plasma bolts bent away from the ship as if repelled by an invisible shield. The spear's light spread through the cabin like lightning trapped in glass. The Zerathi ship fired again. This time, the blast arced backward, striking a rogue gravitational anomaly. The explosion ripped the enemy ship apart. Fiery debris vanished into a nearby black hole. Silence filled the cockpit. Only the hum of the spear remained. Kara let out a shaky breath. Did the spear just use the rift against them? Looks like it. Elias stared at the weapon. The blue glow dimmed slightly, returning to its normal pulse. It's not just a key. It's a weapon that can manipulate energy fields. But why did it help us now? Kara asked. I think, Elias said, it wants us to reach the battlefield. They emerged from the Halos Rift hours later, their ship battered but intact. Ahead stretched the derelict expanse. The sight stole Elias's breath. Massive starships, some larger than cities, drifted in silence. Their hulls were scorched, twisted by ancient weapons beyond human understanding. The wreckage formed a graveyard orbit around a dead red dwarf star. Kara adjusted the sensors. These readings, these ships are at least 20,000 years old, but the energy signatures are alive. The spear hummed louder, its glow intensifying. The tip pointed toward a colossal dreadnought in the distance. Its hull was covered in deep gouges, but the symbol on its surface remained untouched. 3 jagged lines crossing a spiraled star, the same symbol that appeared when Elias pulled the spear from the stone. That's our target, Elias said. The Orion's edge moved toward the ancient warship. The closer they got, the colder the air became. The ship's lights flickered. The spear began to vibrate violently. Elias gripped it tighter. Something's happening. The ship's eye chimed. Unknown signal detected. Origin. Ancient dreadnought. Translation in progress. The speakers crackled. A voice, mechanical and fragmented, spoke. Bearer of the Spear of Tempest, you have awakened the storm. Prepare for the trial. The dead dreadnought powered on. Lights blazed along its hull. Magnetic clamps shot from the wreckage and latched onto the Orion's edge, pulling them toward a docking bay. The ship rattled as the engine shut down against Elias's commands. We're caught, Kara shouted. Elias stood and raised the spear. The blue glow turned pure white. He felt its energy coil around his mind like an electric wire. The ancient voice from the spear whispered, The trial begins. Only the worthy may pass. The docking bay doors loomed before them. The ship groaned as it was pulled into the darkness of the ancient warship. The spear's glow dimmed to black, and the stars outside vanished. The battlefield of ghosts. The Orion's edge groaned as the ancient warship's docking clamps pulled it into the massive hangar. The metallic screech echoed through the hull like a ghostly wail. Outside the windows, colossal support beams loomed in the darkness, their surfaces covered in strange, glowing runes. The hangar's walls pulsed faintly, like veins under skin. The warship was old, but it wasn't dead. It was waiting. Captain Elias Grant stood in the dim light of the cockpit, his pulse racing. The spear in his hand vibrated with cold, sharp energy. It pointed toward the sealed hangar door ahead, like a compass needle locked on true north. He didn't know what lay beyond that door, but the weapon did, and it was leading him there. "Anything on the scanners?" he asked. Lieutenant Karavos shook her head, tension etched across her face. "No life signs. Just, this entire structure is giving off low-level energy waves, almost like it's scanning us." Elias's grip tightened on the spear. "It is." "How do you know?" He hesitated. "Because I can feel it." Kara exhaled slowly. "Great, just great. A haunted warship with a mind of its own." The ship's lights flickered. A deep metallic clang echoed through the hangar. The spear's glow shifted from blue to silver. "The trial," Elias said softly. That's what the voice said. "The trial begins." Kara checked her sidearm. "Let's get it over with then." The outer hatch groaned open with a hiss of pressurized air. The corridor beyond was dark, the walls slick with some metallic substance that shimmered in the faint glow of the spear. They moved cautiously, footsteps echoing through the silence. Elias's heart pounded with each step. The air was cold and thin, making it hard to breathe. The spear felt heavier now, its hum resonating in his bones. The walls came alive. Lines of pale blue light ran along the metal surface, forming intricate patterns. Words appeared, shifting into English. "The spear's bearer walks the path. The trial of the storm begins." The lights surged forward like a river, guiding them deeper into the warship. They followed the path, passing rusted weapons, shattered helmets, and skeletal remains of long-forgotten warriors. "Who were they?" Kara whispered. "The Serathi," Elias said. "The ones who made the spear, the ones who lost this war." But who were they fighting? The spear pulsed. The blue lights shifted, forming ghostly images in the corridor. The corridor became a battlefield. Elias and Kara stood frozen as the war around them unfolded like a three-dimensional recording. Towering alien creatures with dark, spiked armor clashed with Serathi warriors wielding crackling energy weapons. The air filled with the screams of the dying, the roar of explosions, and the hum of ancient battlecraft overhead. And there, at the heart of the chaos, was the spear. It crackled with lightning as a Serathi commander drove it into the ground. A massive shockwave erupted, obliterating the enemy forces in a blinding storm of energy. The recording froze on one figure, a monstrous being with 6 crimson eyes and tendrils of shadow swirling around its body. Its gaze locked onto Elias through the illusion. The figure spoke. Its voice was a cold whisper. "We are the Kareen, and we will return." The illusion shattered. The corridor was silent again. Elias's mouth went dry. "The Serathi aren't the real enemy," he said. "They're just after the weapon. The real threat is the Kareen." Kara swallowed hard. "And if that spear is the only thing that stopped them last time, they'll want it." The spear pulsed, pointing toward a door at the corridor's end. It slid open with a metallic hiss. The chamber beyond was enormous, a command center from an age when planets were battlegrounds and fleets numbered in the thousands. The ceiling was a dome of glass, revealing the shattered star beyond. The floor was covered in circular platforms, each etched with glowing lines. In the center stood a raised pedestal with a socket shaped exactly like the spear's base. Elias approached the pedestal. The spear grew warmer in his hands. He glanced at Kara. "Ready?" "No. Do it anyway." Elias placed the spear into the socket. The chamber trembled. Energy surged through the walls. The glass dome darkened. The holographic figure of Serathis reappeared on the central platform, its star-like eyes fixed on Elias. "Bearer of the Tempest," the figure intoned, "you have reached the heart of the Serathi memory core. The trial of the storm requires understanding. The spear is more than a weapon. It is a key to the storm gate, a gateway to the prison where the Kareen were sealed." prison?" Elias asked. The Careen were not destroyed, only locked away beyond the rift. The spear sealed the storm gate. Now, the Zirathi seek to open it. Kara's breath caught. If they succeed, the Careen will be free, Serathis said, and the galaxy will burn. The lights shifted. A star map appeared above them. A single point pulsed crimson, the Zirathi homeworld. "Their weapon," Elias said. "It's not a superweapon. It's the Stormgate." Serathis's eyes dimmed. "You must stop them. The spear is the only key that can lock the gate." The hologram flickered. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber. Serathis's voice crackled through the interference. "They are here." The chamber's lights died. Elias yanked the spear from the pedestal. The blue glow returned just as the chamber's far wall exploded inward. Debris rained down as Zirathi soldiers in black armor stormed through the breach. Their rifles crackled with plasma. "Cover!" Elias shouted. He dove behind a console, dragging Kara with him. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, scorching the floor. The spear thrummed with energy, begging to be used. "How did they find us?" Kara asked between blasts. Elias gritted his teeth. "They've been tracking the spear this whole time." A new voice echoed through the smoke-filled chamber. "Captain Grant," General Krull's voice sneered. "Did you really think you could outrun me?" The Careen offer power beyond imagination. With the Stormgate open, we'll remake the galaxy. Elias peeked over the console. Krull stood in the breach, crimson eyes gleaming beneath his helmet. The general held a cylindrical device crackling with dark energy. The spear burned cold in Elias's grip. He knew that device. It was the control core to activate the Stormgate. Krull raised it high. "Soon, human, you will witness true power, and Earth will be first to fall." The Zirathi soldiers advanced. Kara fired, dropping two before plasma fire forced her back into cover. Elias's mind raced. The enemy had what they needed to release the Careen, unless he stopped them. The spear vibrated violently. The blue glow shifted to blazing white. Elias felt its energy coil through his veins. The weapon whispered in his mind, "Strike the core. Stop the Stormgate. The storm answers to your will." Elias rose from cover, heart pounding. Krull saw him and sneered. "You're nothing but a fragile human." Elias hurled the spear. The weapon crackled with lightning as it flew through the air. Krull's eyes widened. The spear struck the core in his hands. Energy exploded outward in a blinding wave. The Zirathi soldiers collapsed, writhing as the blast overloaded their neural links. Krull was thrown back against the wall. The core shattered. The spear clattered to the floor, its glow fading. Smoke filled the air. Elias staggered forward and retrieved the spear. The warship's systems flickered and died. Kara limped up beside him. "Did we stop it?" "For now," Elias said, his eyes locked on Krull's broken form. The general's breathing was shallow, but his lips twisted into a weak, bloody smile. "The Careen are already stirring, human," Krull rasped. "And you are too late." The lights went out. Betrayal and capture. The Orion's edge sped through deep space, its engines straining against the cold grip of dread. The aftermath of their battle aboard the ancient Zirathi warship weighed heavily on the crew. Captain Elias Grant sat in the command chair, the spear resting across his knees, its glow dim but steady. He stared at the navigation display. The map showed a blinking red marker, the location of the Zirathi homeworld, where the Stormgate lay hidden. The ancient enemy, the Careen, waited behind that gate. If the Zirathi succeeded in opening it, Earth and every other world would fall. Lieutenant Karavos paced beside him. Her brows were knitted with tension. "That explosion back on the warship should have fried their core," she said. "So why do I feel like we're still one step behind?" Elias exhaled slowly. "Because we are." Krull knew exactly where to find us. Kara froze mid-step. You're saying we were betrayed. I'm saying it's possible. The words hung in the air like a bad smell. The Orion's Edge had a small crew, handpicked for loyalty. But the Zirathi had resources and desperation. Elias's gut told him someone had fed their location to the enemy. He placed the spear in the weapon's cradle and stood. I'm going to check the logs. Watch R6. Kara gave a sharp nod. Got it. The ship's internal systems were old but reliable. Elias opened the encrypted communications log. For several minutes, he scrolled through the routine signals, navigation pings, standard transmissions from passing patrols. Nothing unusual. Until he found it. A burst signal, encrypted with Zirathi code, sent from inside the ship just before they left the warship's orbit. The destination. Zirathi command frequency. Elias's blood turned cold. He traced the signal's origin. The result flashed across the screen. Communication Terminal 3. Crew Quarters. Lieutenant Vex. He slammed his fist against the console. Lieutenant Telia Vex had served under him for years. Loyal, competent, or so he believed. Elias grabbed his sidearm and tapped his comm. Kara, meet me in Vex's quarters. Now. They reached the door together, blasters drawn. Elias tapped the override panel. The door slid open with a hiss. The room was empty, except for the glowing hologram hovering over the desk. It displayed a Zirathi tactical map. Elias stepped closer, heart hammering. The map showed Earth surrounded by crimson markers labeled target sites. The largest marker pulsed over New Geneva, Earth's capital. Kara cursed under her breath. She sold us out. The door behind them slammed shut. Gas hissed from vents above. Trap! Elias shouted. He raised his blaster, but the gas already clouded his vision. His limbs turned to lead. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was a shadowy figure standing at the door. Lieutenant Vex's voice whispered through the haze. Sorry, Captain. It's nothing personal. Just survival. Elias woke to the sting of cold metal beneath him. His wrists were shackled above his head, his feet barely touching the ground. The air smelled of burnt ozone and antiseptic. His head throbbed. He opened his eyes. The room was dim, lit by red emergency lights. Across from him, Kara was slumped against a wall, bound with energy cuffs. Her eyes fluttered open, and when they met his, the fear was evident. Where are we? She croaked. Zirathi detention cell, Elias said. I've seen the schematics before. We're on their flagship. A metallic door slid open. Boots clicked on the floor. Lieutenant Vex entered, followed by General Kral. The general's armor was scorched from their last encounter, but his eyes glimmered with cruel satisfaction. Elias's jaw clenched. Vex. Why? The lieutenant shrugged. The Zirathi made an offer. Survival for me. And power. The Kareen will reshape the galaxy. I didn't want to be on the losing side. Elias glared at Kral. You think she matters to you. The Kareen don't share power. Kral smiled, showing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Human defiance. So predictable. But it no longer matters. He gestured toward a holographic display. The Stormgate is active. My forces are already on Zirathos preparing the final ritual. And your precious Earth is next. The hologram shifted to show Earth, its orbital defenses marked with flashing red indicators. Massive Kareen constructs waited beyond the rift, tendrils writhing. You can't control the Kareen, Elias said. They use pawns like you, and then destroy them. Kral's eyes narrowed. We shall see. He stepped closer, voice low. The spear responds to you. I need its power to open the gate fully. Tell me how to command it, and I will grant Earth a swift death. Refuse, and your people will scream for centuries. Elias spat at his feet. Go to hell. Kral's eyes gleamed. He nodded to Vex. The traitor pressed a control pad. Electricity surged through Elias's body. Pain exploded in his nerves. His muscles convulsed. his vision blurred. The spear's hum echoed faintly in his mind, distant and weak. "Hold on," it whispered. The shock ended. Elias sagged against the restraints, gasping. Krull crouched beside him. "You think you're strong, human, but everyone breaks eventually." He stood and signaled to his guards. "Prepare the ship for the jump to Zarathos. The storm gate will open within the hour." As Krull and Vex left the room, Elias's vision cleared enough to see the display. The countdown had begun. 59:59, 59:58, 59:57. They had less than an hour before the Careen were unleashed. Kara groaned, lifting her head. "Elias, I can't feel my legs." "We don't have time to feel anything," he said through gritted teeth. He twisted his wrists against the cuffs. The metal bit into his skin. The spear's faint hum resonated somewhere deep in his mind, like a whisper through a storm. "Kara," he said softly, "remember the spear's energy field on the Sarathi ship?" She blinked through the haze. "Yeah, it manipulated gravity fields. That energy is still with me. I can feel it, if I can connect to it." Kara's eyes sharpened with realization. "Try." Elias closed his eyes and focused. He pictured the spear, the cold hum of its power. He imagined its lightning surging through his veins. The pain in his body faded. A different sensation took over, the sharp crackle of energy responding to his call. The cuffs sparked. The metal grew hot, then shattered. He dropped to the floor, legs trembling. The energy field around Kara's cuffs crackled and burst. She slumped forward, and Elias caught her. "Can you stand?" "Probably not, but I'll crawl if I have to." The door whooshed open. A Zarathi guard stepped in and froze at the sight of them. Elias lunged. His fist, crackling with the spear's borrowed energy, struck the guard's helmet. The alien collapsed in a smoking heap. Elias grabbed the guard's weapon and helped Kara to her feet. "We're getting off this ship," he said, "and then we're going to Zarathos." "To stop the gate?" "No," Elias said, "to destroy it." He glanced at the countdown. 48:15, 48:14, 48:13. The clock was running out. The Careen were stirring, and humanity's last chance to stop them was slipping away. The awakening. The corridors of the Zarathi flagship pulsed with crimson lights as alarms blared through the ship's comm system. The sharp mechanical voice of the security AI repeated its warning over and over. "Containment breach. Unauthorized personnel in detention block. All units converge." Captain Elias Grant didn't stop running. His legs burned, his lungs screamed for air, but he kept going. The stolen Zarathi plasma rifle was clutched in his hands, its barrel still hot from the last firefight. Lieutenant Karavos limped beside him, leaning on his arm with every painful step. Behind them, the sounds of boots pounding on metal echoed through the corridor. Zarathi soldiers were closing in fast. "Docking bays just ahead," Elias said through gritted teeth. Kara coughed, her face pale. "We get to the shuttle. Then what?" "Then we steal it, get off this ship, and stop that damned stormgate." They rounded a corner and came face to face with two Zarathi guards. The aliens raised their weapons. Elias fired first. The plasma rifle spat blue energy. One guard went down, armor smoking. The second fired, grazing Elias's arm. Pain seared through him. He dropped to one knee but fired again. The guard collapsed with a shriek. "Move," Elias shouted, forcing himself up. The spear's energy pulsed faintly through his veins, feeding him strength. But it was weaker now, like a battery running low. He could feel the weapon calling to him, though it was far away, likely in Krull's possession. They reached the docking bay door. Elias slapped the control panel. The doors groaned, but didn't open. A security lock flashed red. "Damn it," Elias cursed. Kara knelt beside the control panel. Her fingers, shaky with exhaustion, flew across the alien interface. I can crack it, but I need 30 seconds. You've got 15, Elias said. He turned and raised the rifle as the pounding footsteps grew louder. The Zirathi came around the corner. 6 of them in black combat armor. Their plasma rifles lit up the corridor with red streaks of energy. Elias fired back, using the doorframe for cover. The spear's latent energy let him react faster than usual, but he knew he couldn't hold the enemy off for long. A plasma bolt sizzled past his ear. Another struck the wall beside him, spraying molten shards. Elias returned fire, hitting one soldier square in the chest. The enemy collapsed, armor cracked and sparking. "Hurry, Kara," he shouted. "Almost there," she yelled. Sweat dripped down her face. The Zirathi commander barked an order. A concussion grenade arced through the air, bouncing once before landing at Elias's feet. He didn't think. He dove forward, grabbed the grenade, and hurled it back. It exploded midair, sending a shockwave through the corridor. The Zirathi staggered. The door hissed open. "Go," Kara shouted. Elias dragged her through. The docking bay was massive. Dozens of Zirathi fighters lined the walls. In the center sat a sleek assault shuttle. Its engines hummed on standby. "That one," Elias pointed. They sprinted across the hangar floor. Behind them, the docking bay doors exploded inward as more Zirathi soldiers poured in. Plasma bolts rained down. Elias fired blindly over his shoulder, shielding Kara with his body. They'd reached the shuttle. The ramp lowered automatically in response to their proximity. Kara collapsed into a seat in the cargo hold. Elias dove into the pilot's chair. The alien controls were unfamiliar, but the principles were the same. Power, thrust, navigation. He slammed his hand on the ignition pad. The engines roared to life. The spear's whisper returned to his mind. "Hurry. The gate nears activation." The shuttle rose on anti-gravity thrusters. Zirathi soldiers fired from the hangar floor. Plasma rounds struck the hull, scorching the metal. Elias found the weapons system and triggered the rear cannons. Blue energy bolts raked across the hangar, forcing the enemy to scatter. He punched the throttle. The shuttle shot toward the hangar's magnetic containment field. Plasma cannons on the upper deck swiveled toward them. Come on, Elias muttered. The cannons fired. Twin streaks of red plasma blazed toward them. Elias yanked the controls, spinning the shuttle sideways. The beams grazed the hull, shearing off an external sensor array. The shuttle burst through the containment field and into open space. Elias locked in a course to Zarathos. The engines flared, and the stars stretched into streaks as they jumped into FTL. The storm awakens. Hours later, Elias sat slumped in the pilot's chair. His body ached with exhaustion, but his mind refused to rest. Kara slept in the co-pilot's seat, her breathing shallow. The wound on her side was wrapped in a makeshift bandage, but she needed proper medical care. The spear's whisper returned, clearer now. We must reach the gate before the convergence. Elias closed his eyes and focused on the presence in his mind. The convergence. That's when the rift aligns. Yes, the Karine prison weakens with each cycle. The gate's opening will be irreversible if not stopped now. Images flooded Elias's mind. The storm gate, a colossal structure of black metal and crimson energy, standing in the heart of Zarathos. Tendrils of shadow writhed around it like hungry serpents. The Karine pressed against the thinning veil. Their six-eyed nightmarish forms loomed in the dark, waiting to devour reality. The vision shifted to earth. Cities burned under crimson skies. Black shapes descended from the heavens, tendrils lashing across the streets. People screamed and ran, but the Karine pursued them relentlessly. The vision ended. Elias gasped for air. The spear's voice softened. Humanity's resilience makes you the storm, but the key must be used at the right moment. Elias rubbed his face. The right moment for what? To overload the storm gate, to destroy the rift prison, and the Karine, forever. His breath caught. What happens to me if I do that? The spear was silent. He already knew the answer. Arrival at Zerethos. The shuttle emerged from FTL at the edge of the Zerethos system. The planet loomed ahead, a world of dark, metallic cities and crimson clouds swirling like a living scar. Above the planet, the storm gate stretched across the sky. It wasn't just a gate. It was a structure the size of a small moon, suspended within the magnetic fields of the planet's atmosphere. Massive pylons crackled with dark energy as the rift pulsed at the center. Shadowy figures writhed beyond the gate's surface, the Karim pushing against their prison. The gate's activation sequence was well underway. Jagged beams of crimson lightning arced from the surface to the structure. Ships swarmed around it, Zerathi warcraft forming a blockade. Kara stirred, groaning. "That thing's huge," she whispered. "Yeah," Elias said. "And it's waking up." She sat up with a grimace. "What's the plan?" Elias tightened his grip on the controls. "We get through that blockade, land on the surface, and overload the gate." "With what? We don't have enough firepower to scratch that thing." He looked at the spear. The weapon's glow was no longer faint. It blazed with cold blue light, eager and ready. "This isn't just a spear," Elias said. "It's the key to the storm. It can trigger an energy surge strong enough to collapse the gate." Kara's eyes widened. "But the energy backlash?" "Yeah." Elias forced a smile. "Might be rough." The spear vibrated in agreement. Kara squeezed his shoulder. "I'm with you." "Then let's make this count," Elias said. He pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle's engines roared. They sped toward the storm gate, weapons armed, defying the enemy fleet. The countdown on the scanner blinked. 0:15:34. Time was running out. The final stand. The Orion's Edge's stolen shuttle hurtled toward Zerethos, its engines roaring against the gravitational pull of the storm gathering above the planet. The sky was an ocean of swirling crimson clouds, streaked with jagged bolts of black lightning. The storm gate loomed ahead, an immense, unnatural structure suspended in the atmosphere by massive energy pylons. Captain Elias Grant gripped the controls as the ship bucked beneath his hands. The gate pulsed with dark energy, and beyond it, the shadowy figures of the Carrion clawed at the thinning veil. Time was running out. Beside him, Lieutenant Karavos clutched her seat as the shuttle dove through enemy fire. Plasma bolts streaked past like fiery comets. The Zerathi blockade tightened around the gate. "We won't get through like this," Kara shouted. Elias's mind raced. The spear's faint hum echoed through his bones, whispering a solution. He activated the comm system. "Target the northern pylon. If we break that support, it might disrupt their defenses." Kara nodded. She locked onto the structure and fired. Twin plasma bolts streaked through the storm. The northern pylon shuddered and exploded in a brilliant cascade of energy. The surrounding Zerathi ships faltered as the electromagnetic field destabilized. The spear's voice spoke softly in Elias's mind. "The gate weakens. Strike now." The shuttle dove toward the surface. Below, the Zerathi capital sprawled across the dark land. Towering spires of metal and shadowed streets, lit by crimson lanterns. At the center, the Stormgate control tower rose like a spear piercing the sky. "We aim for that tower," Elias said, pointing. Kara squinted at the readout. "It's heavily shielded. Even with the spear, we'll have trouble getting close." The spear pulsed on Elias's lap, its blue light intensifying. He felt its energy surge through his veins like ice water. "We won't need to get close." Kara frowned. "What are you planning?" He didn't answer. His focus locked on the spear's glow as the weapon's power responded to his intent. The ship raced toward the tower. Enemy ground batteries fired plasma beams skyward. Elias wove through the onslaught, adrenaline sharpening every movement. The spear vibrated harder with each passing second. The control tower's main energy core glowed at its apex, feeding the Stormgate. The voice of General Krull crackled through the comm system. "Captain Grant, turn back. You cannot stop the inevitable." Elias's jaw tightened. "The only thing inevitable is your failure." Krull chuckled darkly. "The Kerreen are eternal. The gate will open, and Earth will burn." The comm went dead. The spear burned hot in Elias's hand. He turned to Kara. "Get ready to eject when I say." Her eyes widened. "Eject? What about you?" He forced a smile. "The spear needs a direct energy surge to overload the gate. That means I have to stay." Kara's face paled. "No, we find another way." "There is no other way," he said softly. "You know that." Tears welled in her eyes. "You idiot." "Yeah," Elias whispered. "Now get ready." The tower's defenses locked onto them. Plasma turrets tracked their descent. The ground rushed toward them. 3, 2, 1. Eject. Elias slammed the emergency eject sequence. Kara's seat shot upward, encased in an escape pod. She pounded the window with her fists as the pod rocketed away. "Goodbye, Kara," Elias whispered. He turned the ship toward the tower's core. The spear vibrated with furious energy now, its light flooding the cockpit. The storm gate above crackled with power as the Kerreen pressed against the dimensional veil. The timer on the control panel flashed. 0243. Elias's heart raced. "It's just you and me now," he said to the spear. "The storm answers to your will." He yanked the controls and sent the shuttle into a full throttle dive. Plasma fire scorched the hull. The control tower swelled in the window. The core's swirling energy vortex crackled like an open wound in space. At the last second, Elias stood and gripped the spear with both hands. Its energy roared through him. He rammed the spear's tip into the floor, focusing every ounce of willpower into it. The metal beneath his feet dissolved. The spear's power shot downward into the tower's core. The shuttle disintegrated around him in a cascade of molten debris. Elias fell through the air, wrapped in the spear's energy, and landed on the platform beneath the storm gate. The gate was monstrous up close, a swirling maelstrom of black energy, with tendrils of darkness stretching toward him like eager hands. The Kerreen pressed against the barrier, their many-eyed faces twisted with malice. The sky split open. The spear whispered urgently, "Strike the core. Now." Elias turned to the glowing control nexus at the base of the gate. General Krull stood beside it, weapon raised. His armor was cracked, and his eyes burned with fury. "You should have stayed in your system, human," Krull sneered. "The Kerreen reward those who serve." "Yeah." Elias raised the spear. "I've seen what they leave behind. They don't reward anyone. They devour." Krull fired. Elias spun the spear. A crackling energy barrier appeared in front of him. The plasma bolt ricocheted into the sky. He lunged forward, thrusting the spear toward the control nexus. Krull intercepted with a plasma blade. The weapons clashed with a deafening crack. The shockwave shattered the platform beneath them. Krull drove Elias backward. The Zerethi general was strong, relentless. Their weapons locked. The spear's light dimmed under the pressure. "You cannot win," Krull growled. "The Kerreen are gods." Elias's legs buckled. The spear whispered, "The storm bends to the unbreakable will." He roared with effort and slammed his palm against the spear's shaft. Energy erupted outward. The blast sent Krull flying backward into a support beam. His armor cracked. Blood oozed from his mouth as he slumped, unconscious. The control nexus stood unguarded. The timer showed 00:10. Elias staggered toward it. The spear's voice spoke one last time. "The storm demands sacrifice." He understood. To destroy the gate, he had to become the conduit. He raised the spear high and drove it into the control nexus. The world exploded in light. The spear's energy surged into the gate. The swirling storm above screamed in protest. The Kareen shrieked as tendrils of blue lightning lanced through the portal. The storm gate's structure fractured, cracks spreading like veins through glass. Elias felt the energy flood his body. Every nerve ignited with cold fire. His vision blurred as the gate's core collapsed inward. In that moment, he saw Earth, his home, the mountains of New Geneva, the ocean sunrises, the children playing in the streets. The storm within him responded to that memory. The lightning doubled in intensity. The gate imploded with a deafening roar. The rift sealed shut. The Kareen vanished into eternal darkness. Elias's body disintegrated into pure energy. The spear shattered, its mission complete. Aftermath. Days later, Caravas stood on Earth's surface, looking at the sky. The crimson taint was gone. The stars shone bright again. Humanity had been spared. But Elias was gone. She clutched a small, charred fragment of the spear, all that was found in the wreckage on Zerethos. A faint hum vibrated through the fragment. A whisper echoed in her mind. The storm endures. Kara smiled through her tears. Yeah, she said softly. It does. She turned away as Earth's dawn broke, warm and golden. The storm had passed, but humanity would never forget the man who became the storm to save them all. The storm was here.